In the quiet village of Umeze, nestled along the banks of a great river, life was peaceful and untroubled. The villagers lived simple lives, fishing and farming to sustain their families. The river that ran beside the village was the lifeblood of the community, providing not only subsistence but also a sense of identity. For generations, the people of Umeze believed the river to be sacred, often paying homage to the water spirit as they believed dwelled within its depths. In the said village, a young girl named Amara lived with her grandmother, Mermaid. Amara was a beautiful girl with deep brown eyes that seemed to hide secrets for her beyond her years. She had arrived in the village as an infant, left on Mamejima's doorstep one stormy night. No one knew where she had come from, but Mamejima had taken her in and raised her as her own. Despite her mysterious origin, Amara grew up as any other child in the village. She attended school, helped her grandmother with chores, and played with the other children. Yet, there was always something different about her, something that set her apart. Amara was drawn to the river, but unlike the other children who loved to swim and play in the water, she always kept her distance. No one could understand why Amara refused to swim, but whenever asked, she would simply smile and change the subject. Her distance to the water became more noticeable as she grew older. Amara never bathed in the river like the other girls, and during the rainy days, she would go to great lengths to avoid getting wet. The villagers began to whisper, wondering what strange cause or secret might be causing her to act so strangely. Amara was worried about the whispers of the villagers because she knew the truth about herself, a truth that she does not want to be revealed. If water touches her skin, she will transform into her true identity. For Amara was not just an ordinary girl. She was from the marine kingdom, a descendant of the water spirit from the depths of the river. Her true form was that of a mermaid, and only by staying dry could she keep her secret safe. As Amara grew into an adult, the whispers about her grew louder. Her peer group in the village began to distance themselves from her as they could not figure out what she had been hiding. Amara didn't mind. She had grown used to being alone, and as long as she could protect her secrets, she was content. One afternoon, while Amara was walking home from the market, she heard the screaming of children by the river bank. She hurried over, curious to see what was happening. When she arrived, she found a group of children crowded around a small child who had fallen into the river. The child was struggling to keep his head above the water. Without thinking, Amara ignored the danger and jumped into the water. She couldn't stand by and watch the child drown. She reached out and grabbed the child, pulling him to safety. The other children cheered her up as she rescued the little child. But as Amara stepped out of the water, she felt a strange sensation wash over her. She panicked as she realized what was happening. The water had touched her skin, and now the transformation had begun. Desperate to hide, Amara turned and ran into the forest. She needed to find a place where no one could see her, so she could let the transformation complete in secret. The villagers who had witnessed her brave rescue were puzzled when she suddenly disappeared into the forest. They searched for her and called her name, but she was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Amara hid in a small cave. She could feel the change happening. Her legs were joining together into a long, sleek tail, and her skin was covered with scales. Within moments, Amara had fully transformed into her true form, a mermaid with a huge, bright tail and long hair. Tears filled her eyes as she realized that her secret was no longer safe. If anyone saw her like this, they would know the truth. She would be haunted, feared, or worse, casted out of the village forever. Amara stayed hidden in the cave for hours, waiting for the transformation to reverse. It wasn't until nightfall that she finally felt her body return to its human form. After her body returned to normal, Amara made her way back to her mother's house, sleeping inside quietly. Mama Ejima was waiting for her. Her face was ached with worry. "Amara, where have you been?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "The whole village has been looking for you." Amara hesitated at first, unsure of how much to reveal. She had always kept her secret from Mama Ejima, not wanting to burden the old woman with the truth of her origin. But now, with everything that had happened, she knew she couldn't keep it hidden anymore. "Grandma," Amara began, with her cracked voice, "there is something I'd like to tell you." As Amara spoke, tears streamed down her face. She told her grandmother everything, how she was not truly human, but a child of the marine kingdom. She explained her fear of water, the transformation, and the struggle to keep her secret hidden. Mama Ejima listened in silence. When Amara finished, there was a long pause. Finally, Mama Ejima spoke with her voice calm and steady. "I have always known, my child," she said softly. "I found you by the doorstep that stormy night, wrapped in a cloth of seaweed and the scent of the ocean on your skin. I knew you were special and different, but I also knew that you were meant to be here with me." Amara stared at her mother in shock. "You knew all this time?" Mama Ejima nodded. "Yes, and I loved you all this time. You are my granddaughter, no matter where you come from." Amara felt relieved and collapsed into her grandmother's arms, crying with gratitude. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone. In the days that followed, the villagers' curiosity about Amara grew. Whispers spread, and soon everyone was talking about how Amara vanished after saving the child from the river. Some speculated that she had been possessed by a water spirit, while others believed she had made a pact with the river gods. Amara tried to go about her life as usual, but she could feel the eyes of the villagers on her wherever she went. The stares and the whispers all became too much to bear. She became more lonely, spending most of her time indoors, avoiding the rivers at all costs. But despite her efforts, the villagers' suspicions only deepened. One day, as Amara was walking home from the market, she overheard a group of women talking about her. "I don't think she's really human," one of the women whispered. "She might be a water spirit in disguise. Maybe that's why she never swims in the water," another added. "She's hiding something." Amara's heart raced as she listened to their words. The fear she had kept buried for so long began to rise to the surface. She knew it was only a matter of time before someone uncovered the truth. The tension in the village continued to build, and soon it reached a breaking point. One evening during the village annual festival, a celebration to honor the water spirit, a sudden rainstorm swept through Umwezi. The villagers scrambled to take over, but Amara, who had been helping with the preparation, found herself caught in the downpour. As the rain soaked through her clothes, Amara felt the familiar tickling sensation begin. Panic seized her as she realized that there was no escape this time. The transformation was happening, and there was nothing she could do about it. In front of the entire village, Amara's legs joined together. Her skin was covered in scales, and her body transformed into a mermaid. Shouting and screaming filled the air as the villagers watched in horror and disbelief. "She's a water spirit!" someone shouted. "A mermaid!" Amara tried to run, but the villagers quickly surrounded her. Their faces were filled with fear and awe. The realization that her secret had been exposed filled her with dread. The whispers grew louder and the crowd pressed closer, unsure of whether to help or harm her. She's a water spirit, someone shouted. A mermaid in human form. Amara's heart pounded as the villagers' eyes bored into her. She had lived among them for years, yet in an instant they saw her as a stranger, something to be scared of. She desperately looked around for an escape, but the villagers formed a tight circle around her. Please listen to me, Amara cried out with fear. I am still the same Amara you've all always known. I never meant to harm anyone. Her words seemed to fail on deaf ears. The fear and superstition that had always simmered beneath the surface now erupted into full-blown panic. Some of the villagers began to back away, but others stepped forward with fear. Take her to the river, one man shouted. Return her to where she belongs before she curses us all. At that moment, Elder Eze, the village chief, stepped forward. He was an old man, wise and respected by all. His deep voice cut through the chairs as he raised a hand to silence the crowd. Wait, Elder Eze commanded, his eyes fixed on Amara. The villagers fell silent, waiting for his judgment. Amara, you have lived among us for many years, and yet you have kept this secret from us. Why? Amara looked up at Elder Eze as tears streamed down her face. She could see the conflict in his eyes and the struggle between his duty to protect the village and his compassion for her as one of their own. I was afraid, Amara admitted. I didn't want anyone to know. I just wanted to live a normal life like everyone else. Elder Eze studied her for a long time, then nodded slowly. I see, he said. But now that your secret is out, we must decide what to do. The tension in the air was unbearable as the villagers waited for Elder Eze's command. Some still looked at Amara with fear, while others seemed uncertain, caught between their loyalty to the village and their memories of the girl they had known before long. Finally, Elder Eze spoke. We will not harm you, Amara, he said, but you can no longer stay in the village. The river is your true home, and it is there that you must return. Amara's heart sank at his words. She had known that this day might come, but it didn't make the reality any easier to bear. The thought of leaving behind everything she had ever known and her only family, Mamejima, filled her with sorrow. But where will I go? Amara asked. What will happen to me? Elder Eze placed a hand on her shoulder. His expression was gentle. You must return to the village, he said. There, the water spirit will guide you. They will help you find your true path. Amara nodded, though her heart was heavy with fear and uncertainty. She knew that there was no other choice. The village would never accept her now that they knew the truth. As the rain continued to fall, Amara took one last look at the villagers and at the faces of those she had grown with, those who had been there for her friends and neighbors. She saw Mama Ejima standing at the edge of the crowd with tears in her eyes but a look of understanding on her face. Amara knew that her grandmother had always known the truth, and though it pained her to leave, she also knew that this was the way it had to be. With a deep breath, Amara turned and crawled towards the river. As her mermaid tail moved smoothly over the wet ground, the villagers watched in silence as she reached the water's edge, then disappeared beneath the surface. As Amara pushed herself into the river, she felt the cool water cover her, soothing her fears and anxiety. The river seemed to welcome her like a long-lost friend. Amara swam deeper into the river, letting the familiar sensation of the water flow over her scales. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to hide who she truly was. She was free from the fear of being discovered, free from the judgment of living in a world that didn't fully accept her. Yet, despite this newfound freedom, she couldn't shake the sadness of leaving behind the life she had known. As she swam, the water around her began to glow. with a soft light. Amara's heart pounded when she realized she was no longer alone. Slowly, the figures of other mermaids began to materialize around her beautiful, graceful being, with flowing hair and shining tails. They moved through the water with ease, and their eyes were filled with warmth and understanding. Welcome home, Amara, one of them said. We have been waiting for you. Amara felt a mix of relief as she looked at the other mermaids. She had always known that she belonged to the marine kingdom, but she had never met others like herself. Now, as they surrounded her, she realized that this was her true family, the family she had been searching for all her life. Who are you? Amara asked. We are your sisters, another mermaid replied. We are the daughters of the water spirit just like you. You were meant to join us long ago, but circumstances kept you away. Now that you have returned, we'll help you discover your true purpose. Amara nodded, though she still felt a lingering sadness for the life she had left behind. What happens now? She asked. What is my purpose? The mermaid smiled as their eyes were filled with kindness. You will learn in time, one of them said. But for now, rest. The river will take care of you, just as it has always done. With that, the mermaid swam away, leaving Amar alone in the glowing waters. She closed her eyes and let herself float. The gentle currents carried her deeper into the heart of the river. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of peace, a peace that came from finally knowing where she truly belonged. Few months later, Amara adjusted to her new life in the river. The mermaids became her companion, teaching her the ways of the marine kingdom and helping her to understand her powers. She learned to control the water and communicate with the creatures, and also protect the balance between the human world and the marine kingdom. But despite her newfound sense of belonging, Amara couldn't completely forget about the village she had left behind. She often found herself swimming near the riverbank, watching the villagers from a distance. She saw Mama Ejima tending to her gardens with her old hands still strong and capable. She saw the children playing by the river, laughing and splashing in the water, unaware of the world that existed just beneath the surface. One day, as Amara watched from the shadows of the river, she noticed a group of men gathered near the water's edge. They were talking in hushed voices. Their faces looked tense with worry. Curious, Amara swam closer, careful to stay hidden beneath the surface. We need to do something about what is happening, one of the men said. The river is drying up, and if we don't find a solution soon, we won't have enough water for the crops. The other nodded in agreement. But what can we do? Another man asked. We've tried everything, like prayers, offering, and even consulting the village priest, but nothing has worked. Amara's heart ached as she listened to their conversation. The river that was the lifeblood of the village was now in trouble, and without it, the people of Umezi would suffer. She knew she couldn't stand by and do nothing. Though she was now part of the marine kingdom, she still felt a deep connection to the village that had been her home for so many years. That night, as the moon cast its pale light over the river, Amara swam to the surface and emerged at the shore. She stood in the shadows watching as the villagers slept in their huts, unaware of the danger that loomed over them. She knew what she had to do. Taking a deep breath, Amara raised her hands and began to chant in the ancient language of the water spirits. The words flowed from her lips like a song, carried on the breeze as the river responded to her calls. The water began to rise, slowly at first, then faster and faster until it reached its normal level once again. The drought was over. The river had been restored. Amara smiled to herself as she watched the water flow freely once more. She knew that the villagers would never know what she had done, but that didn't matter. She had found her purpose, which was to protect the balance between the human world and the marine kingdom and ensure that both coexist. After restoring the river, The village of Umezi awoke to a miracle. The water flowed strongly again, and the rot that had threatened their lives was gone. The villagers celebrated with joy, believing the gods had blessed them, while Elder Eze and the other elders offered prayers of gratitude, unknown to them that it was Amara who had saved them. Watching silently from beneath the water, proud of the gift she had given, despite her joy in helping her people, Amara knew that her place was no longer with them. The river was her true home, and her responsibilities to the marine kingdom outweighed her ties to the village. As the village prospered, Amara found herself caught between two worlds, yearning for the human life she had left behind, but bold to the marine kingdom. Amara accepted her fate, understanding that she was now a protector of both worlds. As the day broke, she slipped back into the river, knowing that though the villagers would never know the truth of how the river was restored back, she would always watch over them, guiding the balance between land and water.